Hello, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, and I want to welcome you to the show where we share some wit and wisdom and wonderful stories to help women navigate career and life challenges and changes. And most importantly, so that you know that you're not alone. Each week, through our conversations, we encourage women to be more confident, resilient, and brave in their career and life choices. And we stream live every week on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time on the E360 TV network. And you can find us on your favorite streaming platforms like Roku and Apple TV and Amazon Fire. And we go live simultaneously on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, where you can engage with us. So, and if you prefer to listen to your favorite shows, you can also catch us on all the podcast channels. So if something inspires you today and you want more, please subscribe to your favorite channel, leave us a comment, and share your favorite episodes so we can create more ripples in the world for women. So, who out there is or at one time was afraid of public speaking? I know that was me early in my career, and getting over it was not easy. So today we're going to speak from the heart with Betty Rhoades and talk about normalizing the feelings about public speaking. Betty is a seasoned public servant, licensed attorney, and champion for impactful leadership and communication. With her rich background in law, government, and nonprofit sectors, Betty brings a wealth of knowledge on how public speaking is intricately tied to leadership and career development. We'll hear practical tips to overcome the fear of public speaking and embrace it in everyday life, insights into how public speaking is an essential tool for leadership and personal growth, and strategies for using public speaking to enhance your career and develop an executive presence, and a peek into Betty's approach to authentically confident in communication. Here's a fun fact about Betty. She is a certified sommelier, and we might hear her draw a couple of parallels between wine appreciation and career success. I can't wait to hear those. So let's get this party started. Hello, Betty. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us. I know that you have struggled with a bit of being under the weather this week, and your voice is not perfect. As a speaking coach, that poses some challenges. But I'm really grateful that you thought you could be here today, and we're going to hear that wonderful rasp in just a minute.
Well, it's good for a lesson in not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good in terms of just showing up authentically as best as you can.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. It's actually you're a great model for today's show. So here we go. Public speaking is often viewed with apprehension. I know that I used to shake at the knees when I would thought about getting in front of a crowd. How can we redefine and normalize this idea of public speaking in our everyday lives and recognize its presence in kind of simple daily interactions?
It's such a great question because you're right. So many people fear public speaking. There are lots of statistics about it, and it's fairly well known that death is maybe the only thing that scares people more than getting up in front of a crowd and speaking. But for me, the way to start getting more comfortable with it is really kind of reframing it. So we've decided societally somehow that public speaking means being on a stage by yourself in front of a very large group of people. And when you think about it through that very narrow framework, Sure, it's very scary and it's nerve wracking and it's something that is not common in most people's everyday lives. But for me, my definition of public speaking and how I get my clients to start thinking about it differently is to frame it as anytime you are speaking to someone besides yourself. The voices in your own head don't count, I'm afraid. But if you are communicating, speaking to even one other person, you're public speaking. And so when you think about it that way, you realize you do it every single day. You've been doing it your whole life. And then it starts to be a little less scary, and you can break it down into some of its component parts and feel more comfortable.
I love what you just did there because you're so right. We do speak in public every day of our lives from the time we were very young. This idea of public speaking, that narrow view of it that we have that you just described on a stage in front of hundreds, that would knock my knees together faster than anything else I can think of. Um, but if we think about it differently, reframe it, as you said. So let's talk about how reframing can maybe we can do that in multiple ways. Let's talk about what are some of the other strategies to overcome this fear and maybe become more comfortable in speaking in public settings that are maybe more than one people, more than one person.
Right. So I like to break it down as kind of three buckets. There are three buckets of areas where we can break things down related to public speaking and start to teach ourselves how to be more comfortable. So they are the physical, the social, and the emotional. Now, the physical, that has to do with where are you actually going to be doing this speaking, this communicating? Is it on Zoom or in an electronic format like we're doing now to record this episode? Or is it in person? If it's in person, what kind of room are you going to be in? What is the setting going to be like? Who else is going to be there with you? What are going to be your capacity for amplification, or is it more of a conversation that's smaller? So getting a handle on your physical environment first is a really good way to start getting comfortable with how you're going to be speaking and where you're going to be speaking. And on Zoom, in our environment in this modern age, many of our public speaking opportunities are going to be virtual. And so we must think about things like lighting, like sound, like where you're going to set up your computer and how you're going to be able to look and sound your best when you are online. So those are all very tactical things. And the reason why I start with the physical is that even though we can't necessarily control all of those aspects, they're tactical, they're tangible, and we can start to feel like we have some agency in terms of how we show up in that space. And so that gives us that confidence. That's the
I
first thing.
love that. I love that you started there, and I'm so glad you just said the word that gives us a sense of control over the things that we can control, and that just brings about a sense of confidence that we got this. We at least got the physical part.
Yes.
So I can't wait to hear about the social part. Let's go there next.
Yes. The social part, in some ways, it's the most important. What I define as the social is who is your audience? Who's going to be in that room with you? And one of the biggest tricks for public speaking is to stop making it about you. It's not about you, it's about your audience and how you're going to serve them, how you're going to engage with them. And so taking it off of you also can give you a little bit more of a calm because it doesn't feel so weighty. So when it comes to your audience, a lot of this is just preparation and research. Who's going to be in the room with you? If you're actually doing a more traditional speaking engagement, you can try to get audience info, audience data, specs in terms of who you're going to be speaking to, what are their backgrounds, what do they want to hear. If you're talking more of speaking up in a meeting at work, you know who's going to be in the room, and you can kind of prepare based on that, or you can ask questions of your colleagues if you're going to be speaking with coworkers who you're not as familiar with. If you're going to be networking, my favorite kind of public speaking, if you're going to be networking, you can talk to event organizers, potentially even see attendee lists of who else is going to be there with you. So, doing that pre work, doing that advanced research and preparation can help you start thinking less about me, and how this is going to go for me, and instead how it's going to work for your audience, what you're going to share with them, and how you're going to interact. And again, it takes it a little bit off of you
Yeah.
and makes it feel like you're not just alone. There's going to be this community around you.
Again, that helps to instill some confidence, doesn't it? Especially if you find out that there are some friends in the room, right? Seek out those friends. Say hello to them. Let other people know that you know people in the room,
Yes.
so that they're now you're not speaking to a bunch of strangers, right? Now
Yes.
you have some supporters in the room, and that always, for me, instilled a sense of calm and support.
Yes, 100%. And depending on what kind of speaking you're doing, if you've got some friendly faces, if you've got some folks where you already have some relationship, think about leaning on them as part of your communication strategy. Obviously get their okay first,
Of
but
course.
you can often kind of use those friends in the audience, in the community, to help you get your footing and really launch into some successful conversation.
Right, and maybe to help engage the audience by engaging a
Yes.
friend first. Yeah,
Yes.
love that. Love that. All right, then you said the third pillar was emotional.
Oh yes. And this is the toughest one, and there's no sugarcoating that, but there are so many strategies for tackling this. When I talk about the emotional, I'm talking about what happens in between your ears. So this is your nerves. This is your anxiety. This is your concern. This is your jitters. All of those things that happen when you have to speak to other people and you start getting in your head about it. This is going to be different for everybody in terms of not only how it impacts you, but how best to manage it. But I'll share a few strategies, and we can dive deeper on some if you like. But these are the things that are all related to mindset work. So you should be doing mindset work all the time to shore up how you speak to yourself as a professional, but also as a person. But then there are some things that you can do kind of event specific or circumstance specific if you find yourself really getting caught up in some of this negative self-talk. So some of my favorites, one of the things that I do in my spare time is I like to go to comic conventions. I'm a big nerd, and I dress up as Wonder Woman. So it should be no surprise that one of my favorite techniques for mastering the emotional when it comes to public speaking is the power pose. Now, there's been a lot of research on this, and some of it is conflicting, but I find that it's incredibly helpful. And all it is a few minutes before you enter the room for a networking event, or the conference room for a meeting, or the stage for a more traditional talk. Put yourself in a superhero pose. Mine is, hands on hips, chest out, tall, confident. Just strike that superhero pose for a couple of minutes. And it's amazing how just shifting your body in that way can give you that sense of, I can do it, I got this. So, power posing is one. Something that's related is an alter ego. I love using Beyonce as an example for this. Beyonce had an alter ego, Sasha Fierce, that she turned to. And yes, Beyonce gets nervous too. That's another thing you can remember. This happens to all of us. It's so human, it's so normal. But think about, who would your alter ego be on stage? What are they like? They're probably like you, but just amped up in certain ways. So tap into that alter ego, encompass that alter ego, and you'll start to feel your confidence grow. And then, like Beyonce, you'll find one day that you don't need your alter ego anymore. She doesn't need Sasha Fierce anymore. She's Queen Bee. The other thing that I love is power anthems. Putting your headphones in and putting music on that motivates you, that drives you, that pumps you up, or that calms you down, depending on what you need. Incredibly powerful. You can do that right before you step into any situation where you're going to be speaking and you need that little bit of added confidence and composure. Those are just a few examples. There's many more. But once you really get a handle on your mindset, on your self-talk with respect to public speaking, it's amazing how much progress you can make.
I love that. I love that you just mentioned listening to music, some kind of an anthem, a power anthem, or a calming anthem. How often have you been at a conference and you are kind of waiting for everything to get started and you see the speaker with earphones on?
Yes.
They might be a full set of earphones or they're little earplugs. That's what they're doing. They
Yep.
are being motivated in some way by something that helps them get grounded, get centered, get calm, get pumped up, whatever it is they need. And it's I've seen it for years. I've seen it, and I often wondered. I wonder what they're listening to. I
I know.
wonder
I
what
always
it
wonder
is.
that too.
Yeah,
And
I wonder what it is for them. Yeah.
sometimes at the big conferences, they'll do walk-on songs for speakers,
Yes.
like baseball players.
Yeah.
So think about whatever you decide, whether it's a pump up or a calm down. Think about that as your walk-up song. You know, that's what's going to take you that final step of the way across the finish line to getting in the zone.
Right.
And you know,
And that's really it. Getting yourself in the zone so that you're where you need to be in
right,
order to serve the people that you want to serve by having this conversation, by having this, whether it's in a large crowd or a small crowd, whether it's in a conference room or an auditorium,
right.
or even in a small networking gathering. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that you get to where you need to be
Yes. 100%.
physically, socially, and emotionally so that you can deliver. I was thinking while you were talking about something that worked for me years ago, and quite honestly, I still use this. And it's one of those reframing tricks. When I thought about how I felt when I was preparing to speak, and physically what was happening to me, I had butterflies in my stomach to the point where I could actually feel my body quiver. And that quivering would resonate in my voice.
Mm.
And it would literally make my knees shake. And if I was wearing slacks that were not, that you could actually see the pants move. That's how pervasive it was for me. That what I used to call fear.
Yeah.
When I realized how it manifested in my body, I was talking to a coach one day and talking to her about this, and she said, "What else makes you feel this way?" And I had to think about that for a second, more than a second. But I realized that when I get really excited about something,
Yes.
I get the same kinds of feelings. I get butterflies in my stomach. My voice starts to quiver. I'm so excited. So I decided that I would reframe what I was feeling and call it something other than fear.
That is such a
Call it
great
excitement.
that is such a great tactic, and it's one that I use as well. And I think it's really important to remind people you're excited because you care.
Yeah.
It's because you want to get out there and do a good job, whether it is a speech or a meeting presentation or introducing yourself to new contacts at networking. You're nervous and you're excited because it's meaningful to you. If you
Yeah.
didn't care,
It
you wouldn't have
matters.
a reaction. Yeah.
That's right. It
And so
matters.
and so tap into that exactly like you just described, Maria.
Yeah.
Tap into that and realize that it's excitement because
Yeah.
it's something that matters.
That's
And that's
right. So, I mean, you literally can walk out, talk about walking on to an anthem, your walk on song, but you can literally walk out and say it very authentically, I am so excited to be here, right?
yes,
And then that comes through. That comes through, not the fear, not the
yes,
anxiety. And that's how you decide to show up that way. Yeah, it's very powerful when you can reframe things. I love all of the techniques that you shared with us. So
thanks.
let's talk about how these everyday acts of communication, public speaking, like we were talking about before, how they can be seen as forms of public speaking and how can they contribute to shaping our leadership style?
It's such a good question because the two things, public speaking and leadership, are so intricately linked. When you think about leaders that you admire, whether they are in your professional organization or in the larger world, you see them communicating, whether they're communicating a plan of action or a vision for something, or if they're just trying to kind of make connections and bring people together. So much of why we admire leaders that we admire is because of how they communicate. And a lot of times, the kind of consistent factor across all styles and types of communication is just how are they making people feel? Are they making people feel valued? Are they making people feel included, like their voice and contributions matter? So, a lot of these larger themes of leadership, you can hone them and you can communicate them and you can really uh, make waves in your leadership journey by mastering the public speaking. And this is why I think that the tie between public speaking and leadership, this is part of why it's so important to really understand public speaking less as this once in a while on stage in front of hundreds and more of this everyday occurrence, because we have to practice. We have to practice all of the skills that contribute to our leadership. We have to practice them regularly. So, thinking about public speaking as an everyday occurrence can help us to get there. And so much of leadership, again, is about bringing people together, getting the best out of people, and making people feel like they're a part of a team who want to drive towards a common goal. So, how do you get better at that? Well, a lot of this is going back to that social aspect we discussed. It's getting to know people and being able to target your communication to different people and different styles, but being able to do it on a dime, being able to do it on the fly, quickly, in an agile way, is something that's really invaluable. And being practiced in public speaking can really help you get there. And just think about it this way, you know, even if you are just talking about, you know, hey, I want to grow my leadership in my current company. You can't do that. Well, you can certainly demonstrate leadership in a lot of ways, but I don't think you're going to be able to demonstrate your full capabilities as a leader unless you open your mouth and speak up. And so making sure to do that in strategic ways, in authentic ways,
Yeah.
in ways that are, professional but feel honest and true to who you are
Yeah.
is just going to be so important.
Yeah, I think you are so right about that. And yeah, if we don't open our mouth, then nobody knows what we have to say. Nobody knows that we have value to or value to bring or an impact to make. Yeah, so absolutely, we have to open our mouths. Let's talk about and you talked about doing this authentically and how critical that is for leaders. But what about those who are maybe aspiring to be leaders? Um, how does public speaking, in this broader sense that we're talking about, how does it play a role in career development and career progression? Maybe you've got some insights that you could share, maybe some examples you could share with us.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, well, first of all, I truly believe that you are a leader if you choose to be.
I
And
love
so
that.
you don't
Yeah.
need a fancy title. You don't need to be the head whoever in charge. You are a leader if you decide that you want to be a leader.
Which means you don't need anyone to tell you
Right.
that you are a leader.
Exactly. But
Own it. Yeah.
but to your
Yeah.
point, you do have to hit certain milestones to grow in your roles, in your leadership. And while you can certainly think of yourself as a leader and behave as a leader, you in order to really fully be the best leader that you can be, you have to be able to show other people that you can get the job done. And that is a big part of executive presence, which, Maria, you mentioned that as we opened. Executive presence at its core is the ability to give others, both up and down the chain of command, confidence that you can do the job, that you can make things happen. So while maybe, when I started my career in government, I was a worker bee. The expectation was simply that I would come to work, do the work at a level of quality, and then go home and come back and do it the next day. And that was fine for a while. But then I, like many others, said, I want more. I want to do more than this. I know that I have more than this to give. But you have to show other people what you have to give. So, seeking out opportunities to show other people what you can do, this is where public speaking can come in and can really be a magnifier and an accelerator of progress. You know, we don't get anything by keeping our mouths shut. And that doesn't mean open it at every opportunity indiscriminately, but it means just know that sometimes opportunities are going to come up, but sometimes you're going to have to ask for them. So that's a big piece of advice that I give my clients is look for opportunities where you can raise your hand and say, I would like to take that on, and then use it as an opportunity to show that you can perform at the next level. So whether that's facilitating a meeting or mentoring someone or any number of other options, these are all opportunities to speak and to show what you can do.
Yeah. You mentioned executive presence. I'd like to dig under that just a little bit more. Developing a strong executive presence. Let's talk about what does that look like, and 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 obviously it's going to look different for different people, right?
Sure.
If we are authentic about it, we don't want to take on somebody else's
Right.
executive presence as our own if it's not a good fit, right? But how do we develop a strong, authentic executive presence, and how do we master the skill of showing up that way?
That's a great question. So, I think the most important thing when it comes to developing executive presence is asking for feedback.
Mm,
This is something that is hard for people. It's very hard for people. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at receiving feedback. And receiving feedback is just as important of a skill as giving it. So, while you're out there performing at your best, raising your hand for opportunities, stepping up, ask for feedback from those around you and do it not just from your immediate boss. You are going to interact with people from all different parts of your organization or your industry. You're going to interact with people above you in the chain of command and below you in the chain of command. Get feedback from as many different perspectives as possible and think on it. Be thoughtful with it. Don't just kind of take it and say, okay. Really sit with it. Really sit with the feedback and really think about how you can incorporate it in a way that makes sense for you. Because, Maria, you're exactly right. You don't want to mimic exactly what someone else's presence is, you want to develop your own. So, the other thing that you're going to have to do in terms of processing that feedback is try things. Try things out. Try them in lower stakes scenarios, perhaps, but test things, see
yeah.
what works, and then continually engage that feedback loop. This is why it's really also important to have mentors and kind of your own personal board of directors who can talk to you and who are trusted, who can help you navigate some of this, because none of us have to do this alone. You shouldn't do this alone. We all have communities around us, and so tap into them. I think that feedback, though, is probably the biggest step in terms of building that executive presence.
I could not agree with you more, and I'm so glad you touched on this idea. I call it my own personal board of directors as well. We all need that, to be surrounded by people we trust who will tell us the truth,
Yes.
and who won't judge us, right? But will fairly provide input, feedback, insights, all of this great, back and forth information that allows us to see ourselves like in a mirror. Like somebody's holding up a mirror for us. And then we get to decide, is that how I want to appear? Is that the presence I want to have? And adjust as we evolve through it, as we evolve through. So
Yeah.
setting up that support system first is such a key. It's just essential. If you don't have that and you're trying to do this alone, and you're trying to give yourself feedback, it's so much harder. So much
Well,
harder.
we're so much harder on ourselves than we are on others.
Yes.
And it could be very easy to get into a very negative loop if
Yeah.
you're really only if you're not going outward for some of that feedback and support. And then
Yeah.
you're going to have trouble again with that emotional piece, that mindset piece. You're going to start talking to yourself in unfriendly ways.
Right. That internal critic is going to take over.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I would also just remind people, I think executive presence, a lot of people have kind of boiled it down to a simplicity that I don't love. Executive presence isn't just how you look when you
Mm-mm.
walk in a room. And I think there are some people who've kind of simplified it to be, your physical presence,
Yeah.
which is a component of it.
Yeah.
But your communication, your empathy, your dedication, your reliability, all of those things play into executive presence, how you make other people feel. And I think a lot of folks get really caught up on the physical kind of appearance part and just know that executive presence really is very, very little about how you look,
Yeah.
and it's more about how you are.
Yeah. I think some people may think that the physical presence is necessary because it's the first thing people see. But I believe when you show up, the aura you walk in with is so much more
Yes,
than what you're wearing.
yes.
You
The
know,
other
it's the smile on your face. Is it also in your eyes? Right? Is it so what is the what is the essence, right, that surrounds you
right,
when you walk into a room?
right, and also think about this, especially in today's world, we often will engage and communicate with someone long before we meet them in person,
Yes.
whether it's via email or phone or any of these other amazing technologies that we have. Think about the impression that you are giving with those communications and how you can start to build up your executive presence before anyone has even laid eyes on you.
Right.
And that is another way to really tap into the fact that it is so much less about what you look like.
Yeah.
And again, more about how are you making people feel? What's your aura? Do
Yeah.
people do people, feel comfortable around you, or do they shut down? And how are you bringing out the best in other people in your
Right.
interactions?
Right.
So,
Yeah, it makes me think about one of my favorite shows. I love music, and one of my favorite shows is The Voice, right? So when these singers are first presented, no one sees them. They
yes,
just hear them, and they hear the message they're delivering and how they're delivering it, and the passion they have, and the expression they have. It's so much, and how many times have those judges turned around and been awestruck that that voice came out of that person, right? That body. It just didn't connect for them.
exactly.
So, when we see things, we make certain judgments. That's human, right? And we may be wrong. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so I know that you have probably tons of practical exercises that people can maybe try and adopt to enhance their communication skills, their public speaking skills, to feel more authentic and confident, regardless of the physical, social, or emotional pieces of it.
Right.
Give us some ideas of what some of those might be.
Well, I think that for me, networking, I mentioned that it was my favorite type of public speaking. And part of the reason for that is that it allows us to practice so many different things in one fell swoop. So I often suggest networking as practice for other types of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the different things that you can think about when it comes to networking. So number one, introductions. What's your elevator pitch? So this is a great exercise for having to quickly, succinctly explain what you do. Everybody hates networking because so many people do it badly, and it can get reduced down to that. Well, what do you do? Well, I'm a VP of such and such at ABC Inc. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. So I love the elevator pitch practice as a way to, again, reframe. Instead of giving somebody a title, think about what's a way that you can frame what you do in terms of who you serve and how you do it. So LinkedIn is another really good place to practice this in terms of kind of that headline on LinkedIn. Yes, I could say that I'm a speaker, a coach, and consultant, but at the end of the day, what does that mean? So instead, I say that I help people who want to influence positive change by speaking up and speaking out. So think about how you would do that for your role. How would you reframe it in a way that is actually going to get the other person in the conversation to say, huh, tell me more about that? So that's one way networking helps you practice that elevator pitch, that intro. The other thing that I think networking is really good at helping you practice is agility in speaking. That's a common conversation with clients is, well, where's that line between kind of over and under preparation, memorizing versus really speaking? And networking is a great way to practice being agile because you can have a little kind of quote unquote script that you stick to. You can have that elevator pitch. You can have some short blurbs that you've got worked out. But what happens when the person you're talking to wants to go in a different direction? That's how you can practice kind of being agile in terms of rapid conversation change, rapid topic change. How can you go with the punches? So networking can let us practice a lot of different things in a short period of time, and that's just two sort of brief examples, and there are many, many more.
Yeah, yes, and you're so right. Being able to speak off the cuff, as they say, right? No two people in a networking group is going to ask you the same question
Right.
after you tell them your elevator pitch. It's I've never had it happen ever. I've been networking a long time. It never happened. So,
Right.
yeah, being agile, being able to think on your feet and authentically so that takes knowing who you are.
Right.
So getting really, and this is one of the things I work with my clients to do in the earliest stages of our work together is who are you now? Who are you? What matters to you? What do you care about? What do you value? And what do you want? And when you can center on those things, get grounded there, those next responses to questions in a networking situation will come much more naturally.
100%. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the word value because that's something that you have to be so tuned into all the time in terms of making sure that you're being authentic in any aspect of your life is making sure that you are clear on what your values are And that will be so helpful in terms of driving your behaviors, driving your communications. And I think the other thing that is really good to practice with networking is, again, uncentering yourself and centering the other person, your audience, and figuring out, how can I serve? What can I do to help? How can I impact this person's day in a positive way? And even just starting from that kind of small place
Yeah.
just makes it feel so much
Yeah.
less
The
scary.
what can I do for you instead of what can you do for me? Yeah.
Right. And
Coming
and
from that.
I frame this a lot as, there's two different types of networking. There's transactional networking, and
Yeah.
then there's relational networking. Transactional networking is what everybody hates.
Right.
It's
That's
what everybody
collecting as many business cards in the room,
Yep.
right? And
That's
doing
what
nothing with them afterwards.
well, doing nothing with them, or just immediately going to the, I need this thing, can you deliver it for me?
Right. Right.
And that's what gives networking a bad name.
Yeah.
Relational networking is just, I want to add people into my circle who align with my values, and who are going to, who, where we can have a mutually beneficial relationship.
Right.
And when you think about it that way, again, it's a great reframe. We've been building relationships with people our whole lives.
Yep. Yep. And knowing, when we know who we are and what matters most to us, what we value, it becomes very clear very quickly when we're talking with someone else whether that alignment exists or not. And we know where we should spend our energy, right? With whom we should
Yes.
spend our energy when there is alignment, and how we can gracefully walk away when there isn't. And knowing that is so key
Oh,
to so many things.
that gracefully walking away when things are not aligned. Wow, that is, we could spend 2 hours just talking about that, because
That's a whole nother that's a whole other episode.
that's right. But no, you're totally right. And the more you practice, and the more you engage with that personal board of directors
Yeah,
who you trust, the clearer that gets. You're
yeah,
100% right. And it just takes time, it takes practice, and it takes just a commitment to yourself
yeah,
that you're not going to be the one standing in your way, that you're going
yeah.
to do everything that you can to allow yourself to be at your best.
Okay, so this feels like a very natural place to just kind of wrap things up in a bow here. So, Betty, we call this show Tips for the Transition for a reason. I would love for you to just give us some of the key takeaways, some practical tips that you haven't shared with us before, or something you just want to remind us about. Uh, yeah, as we wrap up today, will you do that for us?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, everybody should just remember that public speaking is so much more than being on a stage at a conference. We're doing it every day. You're better at it than you think you are. And you should embrace it in your life, because it is a key component that's going to help get you where you want to go. And the other thing I would say is, you know, the world needs your voice. So anytime you get into more of the realm of, I'm nervous, I don't want to speak, I I don't think I should have to, or I just don't like this, remember that there's somebody out there, even if it's just one person, there is somebody out there who desperately needs to hear what you have to say. And your gift is opening your mouth and putting it out into the world, and letting the people who need to hear it find you. And Maria talked in the beginning about ripples. And that's truly what you can create, positive ripples in the world, by just pulling up the pants, getting in that power pose and letting your voice shine through authentically, because we need it.
That is so true. And it makes me think about how we can do this so well and authentically by telling our story. So don't feel like it doesn't matter, like nobody will care. Like you just said, Betty, if you touch one person in whatever size room you're speaking to, that's my goal today. Just touch one person with this set of resources that we've created in this show today, then we have done a great thing. And it's like that one pebble in the water, and the ripples are going to go out from there. Yeah, I love that. Betty, thank you so much for coming today feeling under the weather. By the middle of the show, I could barely tell that you had, any deal with your voice. So thank you very much for being here with us. I
Thank you
would
so much for having me.
Oh, it is totally my pleasure. Love this subject, love you, love your energy, and I love what you're passionate about. It is so important to so many people. So consequently, I know there are going to be some people who want to reach out to you. Would you share with us the one best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. My website is shespeakscoaching.com. It's up on the screen, and there you can reach out to me via email. There's also links to my social. So that is the great one stop shop. And I love sharing tips and tricks for making public speaking, leadership, career development less scary, more fun. And so I would encourage anybody to reach out. I love meeting new people. Like I said, networking is my favorite. And so I would love to meet all of you through the electronic channels, if nothing else.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for that. It is such a pleasure to have you here, Betty. Thank you very much. And for those watching and listening, I appreciate that you're a part of our community. So if you enjoyed this episode, as I said before, please subscribe, leave a comment, click a star, throw a pebble in the water, and create some ripples of your own. I love creating and sharing resources for women. As a career and a life coach, I help women navigate challenging times more gracefully. So, if something in this episode resonates with you and you'd like a fresh perspective, reach out. Let's talk. The links to connect with Betty and I are in the show notes below. And let's meet again here next Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, for another inspiring conversation. Because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Until next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.